Imagine having a dedicated team just, sifting through all the day's biggest headlines, the scientific breakthroughs, the geopolitical shifts, and pulling out only the most vital insights just for you. Well, that's pretty much our mission today. We're about to embark on a real deep dive into a whole stack of critical sources. We're covering everything from like the mysteries of the universe and some cutting edge energy stuff, right through to the complex dance of global diplomacy and the always shifting economic landscape. Our goal here: connect the dots, distill the essence, and really equip you with a properly well informed perspective on what's shaping our world right now. We want to cut through the noise and get to the surprising facts and, the crucial implications. Let's dive in. Hashtag Tech Guy, the frontiers of science and human knowledge.
Okay, so we're kicking things off by blasting off really into the far reaches of the cosmos, but then we'll zoom right back down to some pretty incredible breakthroughs happening right here on Earth. We're talking about the very edges of what we understand as humans.
First up, the James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST. We've talked about it before, this incredible eye on the universe. Well, apparently it's thrown a real cosmic curveball at scientists. I was reading its latest images are challenging some really fundamental assumptions about how galaxies form. Now, when I hear challenging fundamental assumptions, my brain does a little happy dance. Tell us, what exactly is the JWST seeing out there?
It's quite profound, actually. The JWST has revealed this, well, striking abundance of galaxies that existed really early on. We're talking as early as maybe 500 million years after the Big Bang.
Wow, 500 million years. Cosmically speaking, that's like the blink of an eye, right? The universe is what, 13.8 billion years old?
Exactly. So it's the very early universe. And what's truly astonishing isn't just that they're there, but what they look like. These galaxies, they aren't small and dim, which is what the traditional models predicted. They're significantly brighter and larger. They almost resemble what we consider mature galaxies.
So wait, not like little cosmic toddlers, but more like fully grown galactic adults right at the dawn of time. My mind is already doing backflips. What does that do to our existing models of how the universe, evolved?
That's precisely the challenge. This observation, it directly pushes back against those traditional cosmological models, particularly the lambda cold dark matter model, or CDM, which, has been the leading framework for decades now.
Right, the CDM model, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so that model suggests that structures like galaxies should have built up much more slowly over time. The conventional thinking was that early galaxies would be smaller, dimmer, more primitive, and they'd gradually assemble over billions of years. But the JWST is showing us that cosmic structures, well, they formed much more swiftly than we thought.
So if they're already looking mature, what does that imply? Is it like some kind of cosmic fast-forward button was pushed? Did the universe just skip intro on galaxy formation?
Well, something like that. Researchers are now looking into these really rapid processes that could account for this accelerated growth. Some possibilities include maybe immense stellar nurseries forming stars at just unprecedented rates, or perhaps even the very early influence of supermassive black holes could have fueled this rapid development.
Huh. Supermassive black holes right at the beginning.
It's a possibility they're exploring. And the JWST observations have also revealed these rich chemical environments within these ancient galaxies. They're seeing bright emission lines from elements like hydrogen and oxygen, which again hint at a maturity that, well, theoretically shouldn't have been present so early. So this really forces a fundamental reevaluation of the timeline for galaxy formation, and maybe even our basic assumptions about the density and nature of primordial matter itself.
Wow.
Yeah, the surprising insight here is that the universe might have been far more capable of rapid, complex organization in its infancy than we ever imagined. And that truly changes how you understand where we come from and, the very fabric of our universe.
Okay, and speaking of mind-bending concepts, I also saw something about, well, it sounds straight out of science fiction, the intriguing concept of a dark mirror universe. Is this like serious science or just a fun theoretical playground? Because honestly, a mirror universe sounds like my kind of party.
Oh, it's absolutely serious science. Well, serious theoretical physics, pushing the absolute boundaries of what we can currently observe. This dark mirror universe theory, it's an attempt to bridge these gaping holes in our current understanding of dark matter.
Right, dark matter, the stuff that makes up a huge chunk of the universe but we can't actually see.
Exactly. It constitutes about 27% of the universe's mass energy content, yet it remains largely undetectable. We only infer it's there because of its gravitational effects on visible matter, right? So this theory posits that for every known particle in our universe, there exists a corresponding mirror particle in a kind of hidden parallel universe, a dark sector.
Whoa, so like a cosmic doppelganger for everything. Is there a mirror me in the Mirrorverse? Maybe with better hair?
One can only hope. But yeah, astrophysicist Dr. Paul Sutter suggests that interactions within this dark universe could be inherently symmetric to those in our normal matter. And this could potentially bridge the two realms. Things like subtle deviations we observe in the cosmic microwave background radiation, or even in how galaxies form, might actually be better understood through this framework.
Okay, so it's not just a fun idea. It could actually explain some real cosmic mysteries.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And the speculation goes even further. This dark mirror universe might not just have dark matter particles, but maybe a complete set of forces too. If this turns out to be correct, the existence of such a universe would fundamentally revolutionize physics. It could potentially unify frameworks that we've historically seen as separate. It really pushes the boundaries of what's observable and forces us to rethink the very nature of reality.
That's incredible.
Yeah, the profound insight here is that the universe we observe might just be one half of a larger, intrinsically symmetrical reality, and the other half could be hiding in plain sight, in a way.
Okay, from mirror universes to vibrating strings. We're also hearing that string theory, I know one of the most elegant but also most elusive theories in physics, might finally be facing its first real empirical tests. And this is happening at the Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, at CERN, that's the European Organization for Nuclear Research. How do you even begin to test something so, well, stringy?
Right, well, this is a huge shift for a theory that, for decades, has been largely untestable. It's mostly relied on mathematical consistency rather than actual empirical proof. But now, a theoretical physicist, Jonathan Heckman, and his team, they're pioneering a novel method. Instead of trying to confirm string theory, they're trying to falsify it.
Falsified. That sounds counterintuitive, like trying to prove yourself wrong. But I guess that's the core of the scientific method, isn't it? Like saying, I want to prove I'm not a giant lizard in a human suit, so watch me try to eat this entire pie.
Precisely. By aiming to identify specific conditions under which string theory must fail, they can draw a clear boundary between what can and cannot happen within its framework. So the LHC, which historically has been a tool for testing the standard model of particle physics, is now being used to look for these really high-energy phenomena that might be consistent with string theory.
Like what sort of phenomena?
Things like extra dimensions, perhaps, or seeing how gravity behaves at really microscopic scales. Any unexpected particles or forces they detect during these high-energy collisions could either support parts of the theory or potentially dismiss aspects of it. The critical insight here is that the scientific method itself is evolving to tackle these grand unified theories, and the possibility of proving string theory wrong might actually be just as revolutionary as proving it right.
That's a great point.
It's like a high-stakes poker game for the universe's rulebook, you know?
Yeah.
And the scientific method is being pushed right to its limits, or hashtag B, breakthroughs for human well-being and daily life.
All right, let's pivot now from the super theoretical to the intensely practical. We've got some breakthroughs that could genuinely make our daily lives better, starting with something many of us probably dreaded in high school: quadratic equations. I saw that Dr. Po-Shen Lo, a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, has introduced a simpler way to solve them. I mean, honestly, just hearing the words quadratic formula gives me flashbacks.
You are definitely not alone there. The traditional quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4at all over 2a. It's iconic, right?
Right.
But it's often taught through just rote memorization, which can be a huge barrier for a lot of learners.
Oh, absolutely. I just memorized it, used it for the test, and promptly forgot it.
Exactly. So Dr. Lowe's new approach, it streamlines the whole process. It focuses more on understanding the relationships and the symmetry of the roots around their average, which is always negative b2a, actually minus b2.
Okay, so instead of just plugging numbers into that scary formula, you're kind of thinking about it more conceptually, like finding the midpoint and then stepping out from there. It sounds almost like a math magic trick.
It kind of feels like one, but it's solid math. It allows students to use simple arithmetic and geometric reasoning. It makes it far more intuitive. So, for example, take an equation like x4x plus 3 equals 0. Instead of the big formula, you realize the roots have to average to 2,
right,
minus negative 4 over 2. Then it's just about finding two numbers that add up to 4 and multiply to 3. And that's clearly 1 and 3. It's conceptually much clearer.
Wow, okay. I actually followed that. I wish I had this in high school. No more nightmares about plus or minus the square root.
Right. This method, it could appeal to a much wider audience. It could potentially make mathematics more engaging and, lead to better retention of these concepts. The powerful insight, I think, is that by reframing these foundational subjects like algebra with better conceptual tools, we can foster a deeper appreciation for the beauty of mathematics. Make it accessible rather than intimidating.
From the classroom to clean energy. I also saw this report about a groundbreaking advancement in energy generation, actually generating electricity from thin air. They're calling it evapolectricity. Now, that sounds like something straight out of a futuristic movie. Are we talking about a literal energy buffet just hanging out in the atmosphere?
In a way, yes. Evapoelectricity is this technology that extracts electricity directly from the evaporation of water vapor in the air. And what's really remarkable is that it does this without any moving parts.
No moving parts, so how does it work?
It basically harnesses the energy that's generated during the phase change of water, from liquid to vapor. It uses these special materials that respond to that energy release.
So it's not like a wind turbine or a solar panel that needs direct sun. It's just pulling power from the moisture that's already around us. That's wild. Does this mean my slightly damp socks after being line dried could power my phone?
Perhaps not quite your socks just yet. But the principle is sound. This method transforms ambient moisture into usable electrical energy. And think about the applications. It could be particularly beneficial in arid regions, places like parts of the Middle East or Africa, where water resources are limited, but humidity can still be relatively high. Prototypes have already shown that it's feasible, that they can generate significant energy outputs.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it could potentially lead to things like lightweight, portable power systems for small electronic devices in remote areas. The profound insight here is the discovery of a completely new pathway to clean energy. It's leveraging this ubiquitous natural process of evaporation that we see every day. And it opens up possibilities for energy independence and decarbonization in places that were previously thought to be, energy disadvantaged. It aligns perfectly with global efforts to cut carbon emissions and transition to cleaner energy.
Okay, speaking of groundbreaking energy, we've also got news about artificial intelligence, or AI, helping to unlock that long-promised clean energy future from fusion reactors. I feel like fusion energy has been just around the corner for my entire life. Is AI finally the thing that's going to push it over the finish line?
Well, this is definitely a major leap toward that goal. There's a collaboration involving Commonwealth Fusion Systems, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory. They've developed this AI tool called HeatML, and it seems to drastically enhance the efficiency of operating fusion reactors.
How does it do that?
Well, in fusion, you're essentially trying to contain and control a plasma that's hotter than the core of the sun, right? Inside a device usually called a tokamak. A critical challenge in these tokamak designs is identifying what they call magnetic shadows. These are zones within the fusion vessel that are protected from the intense plasma heat.
Okay, so the AI is basically finding the safe spots inside the reactor, like a super smart, super fast cosmic GPS for this insanely hot plasma.
Precisely. Traditionally, simulating these magnetic shadows took about 30 minutes, which, is a significant bottleneck in the design and operation process. But HeatML, which was trained on tons of past simulations using deep neural networks, can do it in milliseconds.
Milliseconds instead of 30 minutes. That's a huge difference.
It's massive. Now, it's currently tailored for a specific section of the Spark tokamak, which is Commonwealth Fusion's big project. But the plan is to generalize its use. If they're successful, this could significantly advance the efforts to harness fusion energy as a viable, sustainable power source. There are even some projections suggesting potential energy gains more energy out than maybe even by 2027.
Wow, 2027. That's really soon in the grand scheme of fusion research.
It really is. The powerful insight here is that AI isn't just optimizing existing processes, it's actually collapsing timelines in fields like fusion research. It's making what once seemed like a distant dream potentially a tangible near-term reality. It could deliver an unlimited clean energy future within just a few years.
All right, from the frontiers of physics and energy, let's dive into something maybe a bit more relatable, the fascinating frontier of human connection. I saw this research from UC Berkeley that reveals the surprising brain chemistry behind instant friendships. Apparently, oxytocin, which we often call the love hormone, plays a vital role in the rapid formation of friendships, not just, romantic bonds. So does this mean my casual Friday night chat with a new acquaintance could just be a rapid oxytocin production event? It's not just about good vibes then, huh?
It's certainly more than just good vibes, although good vibes definitely help. The study was actually conducted on prairie voles.
Prairie voles, why them?
Well, they're known for their monogamous relationships and strong social bonding, so they're a good model for this kind of research. And the study showed that oxytocin significantly influences the early stages of friend selection. What they found was pretty striking. Voles that had modified genes, so they couldn't respond to oxytocin, took a full week to form preferences for their peers. Compare that to normal voles, who only took about 24 hours.
A week versus a day. So oxytocin is crucial for the speed of making friends.
Exactly. It seems crucial for the efficiency of relationship formation, although maybe not strictly essential for the formation itself over a longer time.
That's remarkable. So it kind of greases the wheels of social bonding, like the WD-40 for our friendships.
That's a great analogy. And these findings, they could have implications for understanding certain psychiatric conditions in humans where social bonding is affected. The study also highlighted oxytocin's kind of dual role. While it fosters social connections, it can also influence aggression towards unfamiliar individuals, so it helps manage social boundaries too.
Interesting. So it brings us together, but also helps define us versus them a bit.
In a way, yes. The profound insight here, I think, is how much of our innate social bonding seems to be hardwired by our chemistry. It suggests that our social instincts are this complex interplay of biochemical signals that both draw us together and define our protective boundaries. It really reshapes our understanding of the fundamental biological underpinnings of our complex human interactions. Hashtag tag tag 2. Global geopolitical dynamics and diplomatic maneuvers.
All right, let's shift our gaze now from the scientific frontiers to the complex, always shifting landscape of global geopolitics and diplomatic maneuvers. And leading the charge is news about a highly anticipated summit. Let's set the stage for a major diplomatic event. There's an upcoming summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Reports say it's set to take place at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska, which is interesting. And this marks the first full-scale Russia-U.S. summit since, June 2021?
That's right.
So what does this all mean for the big picture? A summit in Alaska, of all places. What's the symbolism there, beyond just being, roughly halfway?
Well, the choice of location itself is deeply symbolic. Geographically and historically, Alaska ties back to Russia given its past as Russian territory before the U.S. purchased it. So holding it there emphasizes a very direct bilateral approach between the two leaders, which could potentially sideline European interests and maybe reshape the perception of a united Western front.
Interesting point. So less about the NATO allies being involved, more just U.S.-Russia or direct talks.
Potentially.
Yeah.
And Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov confirmed the structure. It'll start with an initial one-on-one discussion between Trump and Putin. Then it will be followed by negotiations involving high-ranking officials from both sides, like Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Defense Minister Andrei Belousov for Russia. The primary insight here, I think, is that the location signals a deliberate return to a more direct bilateral style of engagement. It could set a new, maybe more independent tone for U.S.-Russia relations, possibly excluding other key players from the immediate discussion.
Okay, now, on to what many see as the main event, the incredibly contentious issue of Ukraine. We're hearing that President Trump has signaled he intends to negotiate a ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict. And French President Emmanuel Macron even confirmed Trump is considering a trilateral meeting involving Putin, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and himself. But this is where it gets incredibly complicated, right? Trump apparently floats ideas like land swaps, but Ukraine is saying absolutely not. How do you even begin to negotiate with such fundamentally opposing positions?
That is truly the central dilemma here. President Zelensky has been very firm, emphasizing that Ukraine must be included in any meaningful peace discussions, and he's unequivocally dismissed any idea of recognizing Russian sovereignty over contested territories. He points to constitutional limitations in Ukraine preventing that.
And Ukrainian public opinion backs that up.
It seems so. A recent survey showed a significant majority of Ukrainians reject Russia's peace proposals and any territorial concessions. So there's strong public sentiment against it. Now, from the German perspective, Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that Kyiv is ready to discuss territorial issues, but legal recognition of newly claimed Russian regions is just not negotiable. He also said Western leaders will intensify pressure on Putin if no advances are made towards peace.
And Russia's position.
Russia has expressed a willingness for a peaceful resolution, but they emphasize the need to address what they see as the conflict's underlying causes. Moscow has also accused Zelensky of prolonging what they term an unwinnable conflict. They've expressed openness to meeting him under specific conditions, but they also question his legitimacy since no new elections have been held in Ukraine under martial law.
Right, that's another layer of complexity.
It is. The critical insight, really, is that achieving a legitimate and lasting peace becomes almost impossible When one of the primary parties, Ukraine in this case, feels its very sovereignty is being negotiated away without its full participation, or even against its own constitutional principles. These deep, entrenched divisions on territorial integrity make any resolution exceptionally challenging.
And while these diplomatic talks are maybe starting to happen, the human cost just keeps mounting. News outlets are highlighting the ongoing conflict dynamics and the profound human toll. Russia currently occupies about 20% of Ukrainian territory, right? Including key regions like Luhansk and Donetsk.
Yes, and the human tragedy is just immense. The conflict has caused extensive devastation and displaced about 10 million Ukrainians. The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission, the HRMMU, reported that July 2025 was the deadliest month for civilians since way back in May 2022. They recorded 286 fatalities and nearly 1,400 injuries just in that 1 month.
That's horrifying. Are certain types of attacks increasing?
Yes. The HRMU noted a significant increase in casualties from long-range weapons. Those accounted for nearly 40% of the deaths and injuries. And also short-range drones, responsible for about 24%. Aerial bombardments were particularly deadly in July, claiming 67 lives and injuring over 200. And there was that devastating missile strike in Kyiv, Ukraine's capital. They killed 31 people, including 5 children.
Just awful. And the attacks are going both ways, right?
They are. Concurrently, Ukrainian drone attacks have intensified on Russian territory. They damaged apartment buildings in Rostov-on-Don in Russia, injuring 13 people. And in retaliation, Russian forces have conducted strikes on Ukrainian defense industrial sites, targeting places producing SAP-SAND long-range missiles. Russia claims colossal damage to facilities in Pavlograd and Shoska, both cities in Ukraine. The profound insight here is how this ongoing kinetic activity on the ground constantly influences the leverage and maybe even the sincerity of the diplomatic efforts, and makes any resolution incredibly complex and tenuous. The sheer scale of civilian suffering in these escalating attacks just underscore the immense challenge of achieving even a ceasefire while high-level diplomacy gets underway. #be human rights, sanctions, and regional tensions.
Okay, let's broaden our scope a bit to other geopolitical flashpoints and tensions, starting with a bit of a diplomatic spat. Reports say Germany has officially rejected accusations from the United States regarding censorship in its human rights report. This seems to stem from criticism that the U.S. Department of State's 2024 country reports on human rights practices were scaled back under the Trump administration, particularly the language used concerning Israel and El Salvador. So what's going on here? Are we policing the human rights police now?
Well, in a sense, yeah. This controversy really emphasizes these differing views on human rights practices and, maybe more importantly, the integrity of the reporting process itself. You have political figures in the U.S., like Senator Marco Rubio, who are reinterpreting long-held beliefs about U.S. accountability in global human rights discussions. So the situation highlights these ongoing tensions between the two nations, Germany and the U.S., about how human rights issues are handled and interpreted. And it reflects broader concerns about transparency and government actions in reporting such critical data. The key insight, I suppose, is how deeply human rights reporting can get tangled up in political agendas. Different nations prioritize different aspects, or they view reporting integrity through their own political lenses, and that leads to friction even among close allies.
Right.
Okay, shifting focus to domestic unrest. There are details about clashes erupting in Serbia, a country in Southeast Europe, in the Balkans. This is during anti-government protests that have apparently been going on for over 9 months now. They were initially sparked by a really tragic infrastructure collapse in Novi Sad, Serbia, that killed 16 people, prompting allegations of government corruption. That sounds like an explosive mix.
It really is. Dozens were injured recently as government supporters clashed with opposition demonstrators. Riot police had to intervene in Vrbas, another city in Serbia, when these opposing groups confronted each other. The protesters, mainly led by university students, are demanding early parliamentary elections. But President Alexander Vučić has refused, and he has apparently described the protesters quite derogatorily, calling them terrorists.
Wow, terrorists. That's strong language. And violence escalated in multiple cities, places like Bačka Palanka, Novi Sad, and Nice, all in Serbia, with government supporters reportedly throwing flares and rocks. Authorities said 16 police officers were injured. Vučić has been in power for about a decade now, and his presidency is marked by these allegations of suppressing democratic freedoms. At the same time, he's pursuing ties with Russia and China, even while Serbia has aspirations to eventually join the European Union. So the insight here is this incredibly complex balancing act. You have a country trying to align with both East and West while facing significant internal dissent that's being exacerbated by allegations of corruption. It really reveals the fragility of democratic aspirations when they're pitted against entrenched political power and strong external influences.
And sticking with the Balkans, but involving a different kind of tension, we're seeing reports about Milorad Dodik, the president of Republika Srpska, which is the Serb-majority entity within Bosnia and Herzegovina. Apparently, the state court of Bosnia and Herzegovina converted a one-year prison sentence he received into just a fine of about $21,600. What was the sentence for?
It was related to what was judged as anti-constitutional conduct, things like blocking decisions of the country's constitutional court and defying Christian Schmidt, who heads the Office of the High Representative, that's the international body, overseeing the peace agreement implementation. Dodik's presidential mandate was also revoked by Bosnia's Central Election Commission, but he publicly rejected that decision, calling it politically motivated. His supporters have criticized the whole judicial process, alleging bias from what they call the Sarajevo deep state.
So deep political divisions there as well.
Very deep. Dodik opposes Bosnia's efforts to integrate with the EU and actively seeks support from allies like Serbia and Russia. He remains quite defiant amidst all these developments. This situation really underscores the persistent ethnic and political fault lines within Bosnia and Herzegovina decades after the war. It highlights the challenges of building a unified state when leaders of constituent entities actively undermine central institutions and look for external backing.
Okay, now let's jump to another EU member state that often causes friction: Hungary. There are claims, reportedly from the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, that the European Commission is actively seeking to oust Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The reason given is his independent policies, particularly his opposition to EU military aid to Ukraine and Ukraine's attempts to join the EU. That's a pretty heavy accusation, the EU plotting regime change against a member state.
It is a very serious allegation, and it certainly depicts a tense relationship. The SVR alleges that the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, is exploring scenarios for regime change in Hungary. They specifically claim she might be supporting Peter Magyar, who leads the opposition TISA party, with the goal of him assuming power by the 2026 elections, or maybe even sooner. The Russians claim significant resources are being allocated to this effort, including funding from German party funds and support from various non-governmental organizations, or NGOs.
And what does Orban say?
Well, Orban himself has accused Kyiv, the Ukrainian government, of trying to interfere in Hungary's election process. This was especially after his recent veto of the EU's new budget. Orban believes that budget is aimed at militarizing Europe and preparing for conflict with Russia. So the key insight here is just how deep the frustration runs within the EU leadership regarding Orban's stance and his perceived obstruction of EU policies. And this frustration seems to be leading to these dramatic accusations of external interference and plots, whether they're actually founded or not. It really highlights the internal fissures within the European Union when national interests diverge so sharply from broader bloc policies.
All right, let's swing back to the U.S. and its foreign policy. There's news that a U.S. appeals court has ruled to allow President Donald Trump to move forward with his plan to cut foreign aid payments that had previously been approved by Congress. This apparently overturns an earlier injunction that had mandated the Department of State to resume payments. And we're talking big numbers, right? Like $4 billion for the U.S. Agency for International Development, and $6 billion for HIV and AIDS programs.
Yes. Significant amounts. And this ruling is seen as a major victory for the Trump administration's agenda, which includes reshaping the federal landscape and reducing spending. Now, the appeals court's decision focused technically on the plaintiff's failure to provide a sufficient legal basis for an injunction. The plaintiffs included groups like the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition and the Journalism Development Network. The court didn't rule directly on the legality of Trump's authority itself, more on the procedural grounds for the injunction.
But was there disagreement on the court?
Yes. There was a dissenting judge, Florence Pan. She expressed strong concern that allowing the president to bypass congressional budgetary control fundamentally undermined the separation of powers. She argued it's crucial for preventing excessive authority from accumulating in one branch of government. So the profound insight here is this ongoing power struggle between the executive branch and the legislative branch in U.S. foreign policy, particularly over control of the budget. It underscores a key tension in governance. When does the executive's agenda get to override the legislature's stated intent, and what are the implications for accountability and those democratic checks and balances?
And sticking with President Trump's policies but shifting to trade, Brazil seems to be pushing back against U.S. tariffs. Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, announced a $5.5 billion support package called Sovereign Brazil. This is aimed at helping Brazilian exporters who are affected by tariffs imposed by President Trump, tariffs which could apparently reach as high as 50%.
That's the potential figure being discussed. And Brazil's strategy is multi-pronged. The package includes a credit allocation of 20 billion reais, tax deferrals for the impacted businesses, and promotions for domestically produced goods for export back to the U.S. President Lula has openly criticized Trump's rationale behind the tariffs, asserting the allegations lack credibility. He's also pointed out what he sees as U.S. hypocrisy on human rights discussions.
So this is part of a broader pattern of tension.
Yes, it stems from growing tensions between the U.S. and countries like Brazil and India under the Trump administration. Reports suggest Trump's foreign policy is often based more on personal alliances rather than traditional diplomatic relationships. So countries like Brazil and India are adapting. They're strengthening their own bilateral ties and considering multilateral cooperation to navigate what they see as unpredictable U.S. foreign policy. The insight is how unilateral economic actions by a major power like the U.S. can trigger not just direct countermeasures, but also broader strategic realignments among other nations seeking to buffer themselves against volatility.
And there's more tension between the U.S. and Brazil, this time over Cuba. The U.S. has enacted visa sanctions against Brazilian health officials. This includes Mozart Julio Tabosa Sales and Alberto Kleiman from Brazil's Ministry of Health. And it's connected to Cuba's overseas medical missions, which the U.S. labels as forced labor.
That's correct. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated these sanctions target those who are abetting the Cuban regime's coercive labor export scheme. He claims this scheme benefits the Cuban government while, in his view, stifling medical care for Cuban citizens back home. The U.S. urged other nations to pay Cuban doctors directly, bypassing the Cuban government.
How are Cuba and Brazil responding?
Well, Cuba's government denounced the sanctions as just a pretext to attack its foreign revenue sources. They assert their healthcare initiatives stem from a legacy of international solidarity. And Brazil's Minister of Health, Alexandre Padilha, condemned the actions as unreasonable and reaffirmed Brazil's commitment to the Mes Medicos program, which involves Cuban doctors. Context here is important too. The long-standing U.S. blockade has severely handicapped Cuba's own healthcare system, and Cuba has historically leveraged its medical expertise to obtain essential resources, like oil from Venezuela in the past. So this escalates tensions between the U.S. and Brazil, and it highlights the complex interplay of geopolitics, human rights concerns or allegations, and economic pressures surrounding Cuba.
Okay, let's shift back to Europe and the Ukraine conflict's ripples. Hungary is again in the news, this time criticizing Ukraine directly. Apparently, Hungary is blasting Ukraine over a drone strike launched on the Druzhba oil pipeline distribution station, which is located in Russia's Bryansk region. Hungary argues the attack threatens its energy security.
Yes, that pipeline, the Druzhba pipeline, is crucial. It delivers crude oil from Russia and Kazakhstan to several EU countries, including Hungary. So Hungary's foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, condemned the strike as outrageous, emphasizing how important that pipeline is for Hungary's energy supplies.
Have Ukrainian forces been targeting Russian energy infrastructure before?
Yes, repeatedly. Ukraine confirmed this particular attack, though Russia hasn't commented yet, according to the reports. Hungary, interestingly, is also Ukraine's top electricity supplier currently. So they urged Ukraine to refrain from further attacks that could destabilize energy supplies in the region. The key insight here is how the war in Ukraine creates these complex, sometimes contradictory dependencies and tensions, even among countries supporting Ukraine in other ways. Hungary needs Ukrainian electricity, but relies on Russian oil via a pipeline. Ukraine is now attacking on Russian soil. It's a geopolitical knot.
Absolutely. Okay, moving further east to Hong Kong. The landmark trial of Jimmy Lai, the high-profile media mogul and pro-democracy activist, has been delayed. Why?
Simply due to adverse weather conditions, specifically a typhoon hitting the region. But the context of the trial is what's significant. Lai faces severe charges under the national security law imposed by Beijing. These include collusion with foreign forces, which could potentially lead to life imprisonment. Critics argue, of course, that this law is being used to suppress dissent and curb freedoms in Hong Kong.
So the delay is weather, but the trial itself is hugely symbolic.
Exactly. Lai's case has drawn intense international attention because it's seen as symbolizing the broader crackdown on activism and media freedom in Hong Kong. It's considered a pivotal moment for the future of democracy in the city and a real test for the resilience of Hong Kong's legal system under increasing pressure from mainland Chinese authorities.
And just nearby, on the Korean peninsula, tensions remain high. North Korea seems to be dismissing any dialogue efforts. Kim Yo-jong, who is the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and a powerful friend herself, has dismissed South Korea's claims about removing loudspeakers along their shared border. She's asserting that Pyongyang remains completely uninterested in dialogue with Seoul.
Yes, her statement was quite forceful. She condemned South Korea's recent military drills as provocative and reinforced North Korea's long-standing position against negotiations with the U.S. and South Korea. Kim Yo-jong emphasized that the North has never actually ceased broadcasting through its own loudspeakers and is resolute in rejecting any overtures for improved relations. This stance is expected to be formally enshrined in the North Korean constitution soon.
So they're really doubling down on isolation and confrontation.
It certainly appears that way. This hardened stance highlights the ongoing, deeply entrenched tensions between the two Koreas, which, remember, remain technically at war since the 1950-53 Korean War ended with only an armistice, not a peace treaty. She also specifically rejected the idea of relaying any messages to the U.S. through Russia. The message is clear. No dialogue on their terms.
Okay, shifting regions again to Africa and the Middle East. South Africa and Iran seem to be deepening their military ties.
That's right. They've committed to enhancing their military cooperation following a meeting in Tehran, Iran's capital. Senior defense officials from both nations met, including South African National Defense Force General Idzani Mafwanya and Iranian Major General Abdolrahim Musavi. Musavi highlighted the capabilities of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, claiming it's the world's largest anti-terrorism force, and expressed Iran's readiness to share military expertise. Another Iranian general, Amir Hatami, underscored the ideological ties and mutual support, even referencing South Africa's recent legal action against Israel in the International Court of Justice over the Gaza conflict.
Is there a history between South Africa and Iran?
There is. Their relationship is rooted in Iran's past support for South African liberation movements during the apartheid era. Ties in defense and energy have deepened since diplomatic relations were restored back in 1994 after apartheid ended. This latest move signals a further strengthening of that relationship, particularly in the military sphere, which could have broader geopolitical implications in both regions.
Back to technology and trade tensions, specifically U.S.-China. The U.S. is apparently taking steps to ensure compliance with its export restrictions on advanced semiconductors to China. How? By embedding tracking devices in chip shipments. Wait, tracking devices in the chips. Are we talking tiny little spy chips within the superfast chips? This feels like something out of a tech thriller.
It does have that element, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is part of the broader strategy initiated back in 2022 due to national security concerns. Washington accuses Beijing of potentially using these high-tech products in ways that could compromise security. These tracking devices are designed specifically to help build legal cases against anyone attempting to circumvent these export laws. The U.S. Department of Commerce and the FBI are involved in this enforcement effort.
So it's really about tracking the supply chain and enforcing the ban.
Exactly. Now, interestingly, there was a recent trade agreement that allowed U.S. companies NVIDIA and AMD to export specific, perhaps less advanced semiconductors to China, but with the condition that some revenue returns to the U.S. government. And both nations have also agreed to extend a tariff truce, which has helped mitigate escalated trade tensions for now. But the significant insight here is the unprecedented level of surveillance and control the U.S. is willing to implement to manage these critical technology flows. It really reveals the escalating global technological competition, where national security concerns are fundamentally reshaping international trade and supply chains, pushing the boundaries of traditional economic policy.
And briefly, back in Europe, Germany's border checks initiated last year to combat irregular migration and crime are proving costly. Over 80.5 million so far. That seems like a lot.
It is a significant sum. These checks require around 14,000 federal officers operating 24/7 at borders with countries like Poland and France. They've sparked criticism, naturally, for their impact on daily commuters, and opposition parties have deemed them illegal. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is seeking to extend these checks beyond their original timeline, which is raising scrutiny over these rising operational costs, including police overtime and hotel accommodations. And this is all happening while Germany is grappling with a European heat wave, experiencing temperatures soaring up to 37 degrees Celsius. So it highlights the complexities of balancing national security measures with public convenience, regional cooperation, and even dealing with an ongoing climate crisis simultaneously.
And finally, a slightly different kind of clash. Joe Rogan, the podcaster, apparently challenged a conspiracy theory. He was talking to Republican Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who claimed that protests back in June against Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, raids in Los Angeles and other cities were orchestrated and funded by Chinese money. Rogan pushed back.
Yes. He diverged from his sometimes perceived alignment with conservative views on this. He openly portrayed the protests as a legitimate and, quote, visceral reaction from the community, rather than some manipulated event funded from abroad. This exchange highlighted Rogan's willingness, in this instance, to question these kinds of fringe theories and discuss the human impact of immigration policies. It reflects those broader tensions within political dialogue surrounding these really critical and sensitive issues. #Chag3, economic shifts and market dynamics.
Okay, let's shift gears now and dive into the global economy. From the highs of Wall Street to the very real challenges facing consumers, we're seeing some fascinating and sometimes pretty challenging dynamics at play. #A, global markets and financial confidence. So the stock market has been on a bit of a tear recently. Reports say the Dow Jones Industrial Average soared by 400 points and the S&P 500 even reached a new record high. This was the second consecutive day of positive performance for the major indices. So what's driving this? Are we all getting rich? What are investors thinking right now?
Well, investor optimism seems clearly driven by these expectations that the Federal Reserve might cut interest rates soon. The thinking is that a rate cut could stimulate economic growth. And you see this sentiment reflected not just in the U.S., but in rising global stock markets too. And U.S. bond prices have been rising, which indicates a shift towards potentially riskier assets like stocks.
But is it all smooth sailing?
Not necessarily. While the rally followed a favorable inflation report, analysts are still expressing caution about potential underlying issues. They're noting that optimism and volatility continue to kind of coexist in the current market environment. It's a delicate balance, you know. Good news can quickly lead to some cautious recalibration if other data points don't align. The critical insight for you, the listener, is how these seemingly abstract market numbers directly impact your savings, your investments, and the broader economic outlook. It signals the ongoing dynamics in the financial sector amid changing fiscal policies and that constant tug-of-war between optimism and the underlying economic realities.
And in a related economic story, David Mericle, who's the chief U.S. economist at Goldman Sachs, has apparently reaffirmed his commitment to his economic outlook and analysis. And this is despite criticism from U.S. President Donald Trump regarding some of his economic predictions. I mean, it must be tough being an economist these days. Everybody's got an opinion, especially presidents.
It certainly puts him in the spotlight. But this resilient stance from Mericle, it showcases his dedication to providing accurate economic insights, regardless of external political pressures. He apparently remained unfazed, emphasizing the importance of maintaining an objective, data-driven approach based on robust data and reasoning. And his position reflects a broader trend, I think, within the economics profession. Analysts constantly have to navigate these politically charged landscapes while trying to uphold the integrity of their forecasts, especially in times of uncertainty like now. The powerful insight is really the vital role of independent, data-driven analysis in a world where economic projections are increasingly subject to political scrutiny and pressure. It's a good reminder that reliable information often needs to stand firm against external influence. #TV economic challenges and consumer impacts.
Okay, let's turn our attention now to some direct economic challenges impacting people on the ground. Starting with a really paradoxical situation in Iraq, a country in Western Asia. Amid soaring summer temperatures, Iraq is grappling with a severe power crisis. They're significantly relying on private generators for electricity. These supply about 20% of the country's power. Apparently, the national grid is outdated and can only provide about half of what's actually needed.
Yeah, roughly. The grid provides about 27,000 megawatts, but the need is estimated between 50,000 and 55,000 megawatts, so there's a huge gap. And the impact on households is severe. People often pay around $100 a month just for this private generator power. But they also face issues like constant noise pollution and serious health hazards from the fumes and operation of these generators.
And is this private generation regulated?
Largely unregulated. A recent report suggested that this private power generation could be costing Iraqis over $4 billion a year. And the connections, the ownership of these generators, are often linked to local politicians and militias, forming what people there call a generator mafia. So while these generators are absolute lifesavers in extreme heat, allowing people to survive, they simultaneously contribute significantly to environmental pollution and health risks. It creates this incredibly complex paradox for the citizens who depend on them.
Wow, a generator mafia. That's quite a term.
It is. The profound insight here is how critical infrastructure failures, especially in developing or post-conflict nations, can breed these complex informal economies. Economies that, while meeting immediate desperate needs, also perpetuate corruption, environmental damage, and deep societal inequities. It reveals a nation kind of caught in a cycle where a temporary solution has become a permanent, burdensome, and often dangerous fixture.
A somewhat similar, though different, kind of economic divide seems to be unfolding in Cuba, the island nation in the Caribbean. Reports detail the plummeting value of the Cuban peso and what's being described as monetary apartheid. The peso has seen a significant drop in value on the informal market, hitting a historic low of 400 pesos for $1 and even 445 pesos for €1. Meanwhile, the official fixed exchange rate remains stuck at 24 pesos for $1.
Yeah, that massive gap between the official and informal rates highlights this widening economic divide in Cuba. You have a split between those who somehow have access to dollars or euros and those relying solely on the peso. Public sector salaries average just $14.60 per month. But consumer prices have quadrupled since 2020, so the hardship for ordinary Cubans relying on peso salaries is immense.
And how has the government responded to this?
Well, the Cuban government responded by opening over 200 state-run stores that only accept U.S. dollars. This effectively marginalizes those Cubans who don't have access to foreign currency, and it's raising concerns about social tensions. The critical insight is how currency policies, especially in state-controlled or isolated economies, can dramatically exacerbate inequalities and create a kind of two-tiered society. It leads to significant social and economic instability. Cuba's current monetary crisis really illustrates these deepening inequalities and raises huge questions about the future of its economy amidst these evolving currency policies and its complex, long-standing relationship with American influence and the U.S. dollar.
Okay, from national currencies to digital payments back in the U.S., New York State is suing Zelle, the digital payment service. They're alleging Zelle failed to implement adequate security measures, leading to over $1 billion in consumer fraud losses. $1 billion in fraud. That's a staggering amount of lost digital pennies, isn't it? And a major hit to trust in our mobile wallets. It feels like every time we get something convenient, the bad guys figure out how to exploit it immediately.
It really is a constant cat-and-mouse game in the fintech world. The lawsuit, which is being led by New York Attorney General Letitia James, contends that Zelle's parent company basically allowed widespread fraud to happen without putting sufficient safeguards in place. So this legal action, it highlights these increasing concerns about the security of digital financial services and just how vulnerable they can be to fraud. Zelle is facing scrutiny for what the lawsuit calls lax protocols, which may have enabled unqualified access and misuse by fraudsters on a massive scale.
What could be the broader impact of this lawsuit?
Well, the outcome could definitely extend beyond just Zelle. It could potentially impact regulatory practices across the entire digital payment sector, especially as more and more consumers rely on these services for everyday transactions. The profound insight here, I think, is how quickly innovation in financial technology or fintech can outpace the necessary regulatory frameworks and consumer protections. It leaves consumers vulnerable to these constantly evolving threats. It's a stark reminder that convenience often comes with new risks, and the battle for digital security is an ever-evolving one.
Now, shifting to the UK retail sector, some tough news for a well-known brand. Claire's, the accessories and jewelry retailer, has officially entered administration in the UK and Ireland. That raises significant concerns for its 2,150 employees, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's a very worrying time for them. Despite this setback, the retailer did announce that its shops will remain operational for now, as it explores a potential sale. But this move signals a really critical phase for Claire's. The company has struggled with financial instability for a while, and that's been exacerbated by the ongoing economic challenges facing many retailers, things like shifts in consumer behavior towards online shopping and intense competition.
So what happens now during administration?
The administration process essentially offers an opportunity to restructure the business, or, more hopefully, find a buyer who can rescue the business and preserve those jobs. But if no buyer is found, closures could lead to substantial job losses and further consolidation in the retail sector. It really reflects the immense pressures many traditional brick-and-mortar stores are facing in adapting to changing consumer demands and the online marketplace.
But amidst that tough retail news, there was actually a glimmer of good news from the broader UK economy. Reports indicate that UK economic growth actually beat forecasts despite a general slowdown. The economy showed surprising resilience in the second quarter of the year, that's April to June. It expanded by 0.3%, which was better than the stagnation or even contraction that economists had expected. So is the UK economy just doing a little economic shrug and saying, I'm fine, thanks for asking?
It kind of seems that way, at least for that quarter. This growth occurred despite all the headwinds, rising living costs, inflationary pressures, geopolitical tensions. It suggests a slightly more optimistic economic outlook than predicted. Analysts think that consumer spending, particularly in services and retail sectors, perhaps benefiting from post-pandemic reopening effects, may have buoyed this growth.
Can it last, though?
That's the big question. The data points to an economy that, while still fragile, is showing some signs of recovery. But whether this trend can be sustained really depends on external factors like global economic conditions and internal factors like the UK's own inflation rates. The key insight is that even amidst significant global economic challenges, specific sectors and consumer resilience can sometimes drive unexpected growth. Though, of course, the underlying vulnerabilities definitely remain, it's a reminder that economic recovery often has nuanced, localized drivers, even within broader challenging environments.
Okay, let's look at online shopping issues, this time in Hong Kong. There's been a surge in complaints related to online shopping there. Hong Kong's Consumer Council recorded about 17,000 complaints just in 2024, which is like 40% of all consumer grievances. What kinds of problems are people having?
The common issues reported include difficulties with product returns, especially for defective items. Also, package delays that ended up resulting in fines for late pickup, and even lost items. Complaints specifically related to logistics services saw a notable increase, almost doubling from 148 in the first half of 2023 to 279 in the same period in 2024.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Specific cases highlighted included a consumer facing major issues trying to return a defective computer monitor, despite promises of local service. Another person incurred late fees because the text message timing for package collection was off. And there were security concerns raised about a self-pickup point where packages were apparently left unattended and easily accessible.
So what's being done?
Well, the Consumer Council's intervention often managed to secure refunds for people, and they've urged online retailers to reassess their operational commitments to enhance consumer trust. It really underscores the growing pains of e-commerce infrastructure trying to keep up with massive demand, and the need for better logistics, customer service, and security in the online retail space.
And finally, in the UK, the cost of university is back in the spotlight. Significant increases in tuition fees have reignited discussions about the overall expense of higher education.
Yes, and it's not just tuition fees. Maintenance loans, which help students with living expenses, have also been adjusted upwards to try and keep pace with escalating costs. This is leading many prospective students to question not only how they can possibly fund their education, but also whether the investment is even worthwhile anymore, considering the potential return in terms of future earnings in today's challenging job market.
So it's a real cost-benefit analysis students are having to do.
Absolutely. The reports provide a comprehensive overview of all the costs involved: tuition, accommodation, general living expenses. They also offer guidance for students who might be unhappy with their A-level results, mentioning options like appeals or retaking exams, and emphasizing the importance of understanding grade boundaries and seeking advice. The broader societal relevance here is the ongoing concern about the accessibility and affordability of higher education in Britain amidst these economic challenges. It prompts really important, informed decision-making about academic futures and the value proposition of a university degree today. #TagTagC, Business Ventures and Strategic Investments.
Okay, let's round out our economic deep dive with some interesting business ventures and strategic investments happening around the globe, starting with a really big one in the green energy sector. China's Ganfeng Lithium is forming a major partnership in Argentina, the South American country. Reports say they're collaborating with a Swiss company, Lithium Argentina, to develop one of South America's largest lithium extraction projects. This is happening in Argentina's Salta province. This sounds like a huge play for the future of batteries, right?
It is absolutely massive. This partnership is set to merge 3 neighboring brine deposits, these lithium-rich salt flats. And the strategic goal is an annual production target of 150,000 tons of lithium carbonate. That's responding directly to the increasing global demand for lithium, which, as you know, is essential for electric vehicle batteries and also for renewable energy storage systems.
Is there context for this timing?
Yes. This collaboration follows a recent mine closure by CATL, which is China's largest battery manufacturer. That closure actually drove international lithium prices higher, so the demand and strategic importance are clear. In this new venture, Ganfeng will control 67%, and there's already $1.8 billion invested supporting infrastructure development and creating a workforce of over 2,000 people.
Are they using new technology?
Yes. What's particularly innovative are the methods they plan to use. They're combining traditional solar evaporation with newer direct lithium extraction, or DLE, techniques. This aims to minimize water usage, which is a big environmental concern with brine extraction, and also accelerate the output. The profound insight here is really the escalating global competition for these critical resources like lithium, which are absolutely foundational to the clean energy transition. This venture not only highlights the strategic importance of the Lithium Triangle region in South America, which holds a huge portion of the world's lithium reserves, but it also showcases how innovative extraction methods are being deployed to meet this burgeoning demand, fundamentally reshaping the global energy and automotive landscapes.
Okay, staying in the Americas, but this time focusing on a perhaps more iconic brand. Playboy is relocating its global headquarters from Los Angeles to Miami Beach. I guess the bunnies are getting tans and the company is getting a fresh start. What does this all mean for their brand strategy?
Well, the company states the aim is to benefit from Miami Beach's vibrant and culturally influential environment. It's definitely a strategic move. And alongside the headquarters relocation, Playboy is also developing a new Playboy Club in Miami Beach. This is in partnership with a leading hospitality company. The club will apparently feature a high-end restaurant and an exclusive members-only space inspired by the famous Playboy Mansion, aiming to enhance the brand's heritage.
So it's more than just moving offices. It's about reinventing the brand experience.
Yeah, exactly. Ben Cohn, Playboy's CEO, outlined plans to create world-class content and experiences. This includes building state-of-the-art content studios in Miami Beach to support Playboy's expanding network of creators and its multimedia content production. A Miami Beach commissioner welcomed the move, noting it would create high-paying jobs and reinforce the city's commitment to innovation and economic vitality. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really reflects how legacy brands, even ones like Playboy with a very specific history, are strategically leveraging these culturally vibrant centers to try and reinvent their image and also capitalize on evolving digital content trends and the luxury hospitality market. It's a bet on place and culture driving brand transformation.
Okay, moving south now to Mexico. Guadalajara, located in Mexico's Jalisco state, is apparently rapidly establishing itself as the country's tech capital. It's often being dubbed Mexico's Silicon Valley. Now, that's a cool nickname. Are we talking about a real challenger to the original Silicon Valley up in California?
Well, while it might not replace the original just yet, it's certainly becoming a formidable emerging tech hub in its own right. Guadalajara has attracted over 1,000 tech firms already. This includes major international companies like Facebook, Google, Apple, Netflix, and LinkedIn setting up operations there. And this has generated approximately 150,000 jobs.
Wow, 150,000 jobs. Why Guadalajara specifically?
Several reasons. The city concentrates about 40% of Mexico's entire IT industry. A big factor is its educational infrastructure. It has 16 technology institutes and 12 universities, which are producing a really skilled workforce. We're talking around 130,000 software engineers graduating annually in the region. Plus, its geographical proximity to other North American tech hubs and a growing relatively affordable labor market further facilitate this development.
And new companies are still moving in.
Yes. Just recently, Ness Digital Engineering, which is headquartered in New York, announced it will open its first Latin American office in Guadalajara. They plan to hire over 200 tech professionals by the end of 2026. This move highlights not just Mexico's growing tech talent pool, but also Ness's stated intent to prioritize employee well-being through competitive pay and comprehensive benefits, perhaps offering an alternative to the high-stress environments sometimes associated with other tech hubs. The powerful insight here is how local talent pools, strategic geographical positioning, and concerted investment are creating these new global tech hubs. They're reshaping the digital services landscape in the Americas and offering compelling alternatives, both economically and perhaps culturally, to the traditional tech centers.
And finally, a bit of celebrity business drama. Nike, the U.S. sportswear giant, has initiated legal proceedings against Hong Kong celebrity Edison Cheng Kun-hei. They're seeking about HK $1 million, which is roughly U.S. $126,000, for an alleged breach of contract. What's this about?
The lawsuit was filed in the Central District Court of California. Nike is demanding that amount, along with interest and reimbursement for their collection and attorney's fees. They assert that Chen is personally liable because he signed a personal guarantee back in September 2019.
And what's the context? Why the dispute now?
Well, this follows some media reports, some of which mistakenly cited a much larger U.S. $126 million amount due to a clerical error, causing a bit of a stir. It also follows a cryptic social media post by Chen himself, featuring him wearing new Adidas shoes. This strongly suggested a new partnership with Nike's main rival, Adidas, after Chen ended his long-term collaboration with Nike back in 2023. So this case really highlights the complexities and sometimes the messiness of celebrity endorsement deals and contract disputes in the high-stakes world where global business, fashion, and entertainment intersect. #FUZ, climate, health, and societal challenges.
All right, let's turn our attention now to some of the most pressing challenges facing our planet and our communities. We're talking climate, health, and social justice issues. Hashtag A. Environmental impacts and responses. Starting with a really dramatic climate event up in Alaska, reports say Juneau, Alaska's capital, faced its most significant glacial flood on record. This was caused by a glacier outburst from something called the Suicide Basin, which sent a massive surge of water into the region, causing the Mendenhall River to reach record levels. So what does this all mean? We build a dirt wall and saved a capital city. Go human ingenuity. Or are we just, building sandcastles against a coming tsunami here?
It's probably a bit of both, unfortunately. It is a remarkable testament to rapid response and community preparedness. Authorities issued significant evacuation orders, and yes, a makeshift dirt wall did successfully hold back the floodwaters, preventing severe flooding in the capital city itself. But it raises this profound question. How scalable and sustainable are these kinds of reactive measures against the accelerating pace of climate impacts globally? This unprecedented event just underscores the increasing threats posed by climate change and the rapid melting of glaciers, particularly in places like Alaska. And is sparking really critical discussions about infrastructure resilience in these vulnerable areas. The key insight, I think, is that while human ingenuity can provide these crucial short-term fixes, the escalating frequency and intensity of climate shocks demand proactive, long-term adaptation strategies, not just crisis management. It reveals the potential limits of reactive resilience in the face of a fundamentally changing climate.
And it's not just flooding from melting glaciers, right? There are also warnings about rising urban wildfire risks. Researchers are saying that rising temperatures due to climate change are significantly increasing the risk of wildfires in cities, not just in remote forests. Summers are getting hotter and drier, escalating the likelihood of multiple simultaneous wildfires. So it's not just about forests burning anymore, but potentially our urban areas too. That's a terrifying thought.
It is, and it's a growing, recognized threat. This trend poses serious dangers to the environment, obviously, but also to human safety and critical urban infrastructure. It can lead to devastating property loss, severe air quality issues affecting millions, and the displacement of entire communities. The reports highlight the importance of understanding these evolving risks and advocate for proactive measures. You have this convergence of increased urbanization happening at the same time as climate change intensifies. And that presents unique challenges that require immediate attention from city planners, from policymakers. It requires community preparedness efforts and new effective firefighting strategies designed for urban environments. The powerful insight here is how climate change is creating these new interfaces of risk. The wildland-urban interface, as they call it, is expanding rapidly, and it's forcing cities to rethink their fundamental design and preparedness for environmental threats that were once considered primarily rural problems.
And it seems like getting global agreement on tackling these environmental issues remains incredibly difficult. Negotiations for a global treaty to combat plastic pollution, held at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, apparently concluded without a clear agreement in sight. The latest draft text was widely criticized for failing to address critical issues like limiting plastic production itself and curbing harmful chemicals in plastic products. Another major global issue where consensus just seems elusive. Why is it so hard to get everyone on the same page for something that feels so obviously important, like reducing plastic?
It really highlights the immense challenge of trying to align diverse national economic interests with urgent global environmental imperatives, especially when powerful industries benefit enormously from the current production models. The participating countries remain deeply divided in Geneva. You had an ambitious bloc of nations, including countries like Panama, the European Union as a whole, Kenya, and the island nation of Tuvalu, expressing deep disappointment with what they saw as inadequate binding obligations in the draft. In contrast, you had oil-producing nations arguing that the proposal overstepped reasonable limits, wanting the focus to be predominantly on waste management, not on cutting production.
So basically, manage the trash, don't stop making it.
That seems to be the crux of the division. And with approximately 400 million tons of plastic being produced annually now, environmental NGOs intensified their calls for decisive actions. They warned that a watered-down agreement simply would not suffice and could lead to immense negative implications for nature and communities worldwide. The profound insight here, unfortunately, is that environmental diplomacy often becomes this battleground where powerful economic incentives override urgent planetary needs. This impasse isn't just a diplomatic failure, it's a stark reminder that economic self-interest, often more than environmental urgency, can dictate the pace of progress or lack thereof. It reveals the true power dynamics in global environmental policy.
And extreme weather events are causing immediate emergencies too. Lithuania, the Baltic nation in Europe, has declared a state of emergency due to heavy rainfall.
Yes, due to severe damage from anomalously heavy rainfall this summer, which has devastated the country's agricultural harvest. This prolonged rainy period, which started back in late May, apparently caused damages ranging from 50% to 70% of crops in many areas. Some fields remain flooded, preventing farmers from even harvesting what's left. This heavy rainfall was noted as the second highest recorded in Lithuania for June and July, just behind 2007.
So what does the state of emergency do?
The measure aims to provide coordinated support for the affected farmers. It allows the government to waive certain administrative requirements and potentially offer financial aid. And this situation mirrors developments in neighboring Latvia, which has also declared a state of emergency for similar reasons. It's raising concerns in the region about potential food price increases due to the poor harvest in both countries. It's another direct impact of extreme, perhaps climate change-influenced, weather patterns hitting agriculture hard. #B public health and safety.
Let's turn our attention now to public health, starting with some potentially promising news in cancer research. Research from Edith Cowan University in Australia suggests that engaging in just a single session of resistance training or high-intensity interval training HIIT can significantly aid in combating cancer. Does this mean my rather half-hearted attempt at push-ups this morning could actually be fighting off cancer cells? That would be fantastic news.
Well, potentially. It is truly exciting research. What they found is that a single session of these types of exercise significantly boosts levels of myokines. Myokines are proteins that are produced in our muscles during exercise, and they seem to exhibit anti-cancer properties. This boost in myokines can potentially decrease cancer cell proliferation, their growth rate, by maybe 20 to 30% based on lab studies. So it indicates a really promising avenue for therapeutic interventions in cancer care.
Have they tested this in people?
Yes. Studies involving breast cancer survivors, for instance, showed that exercise escalated myokine levels both before and after the exercise session. So integrating exercise into cancer treatment plans could offer substantial health benefits, particularly perhaps in reducing inflammation, which is known to be a key factor contributing to cancer recurrence.
Is there a catch?
One note of caution came from the researcher Francesco Bettoriga. He cautioned against attempting quick weight loss without exercise, as that could actually negate the benefits that come from maintaining or even increasing muscle mass, which is where these helpful myokines are produced. The profound insight, I think, is that our muscles aren't just for movement. They're like these dynamic chemical factories producing natural potent compounds that can actively combat diseases like cancer. It suggests that regular physical activity is a fundamental internal defense mechanism that maybe we often overlook.
Okay, from hope in the lab to absolute heartbreak on the ground. We have reports detailing Sudan's deadly cholera outbreak amidst its ongoing conflict. The humanitarian crisis in Sudan, the East African country, has escalated dramatically with this cholera outbreak. Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, is describing it as the worst Sudan has faced in years.
The numbers are staggering and deeply concerning. MSF is reporting over 2,470 deaths and nearly 100,000 suspected cases just in the past year. And this outbreak is being severely fueled by the ongoing conflicts, particularly in the Darfur region, where fighting between the Sudanese army and paramilitary forces has just exacerbated the already dire humanitarian crisis. Clean water is incredibly scarce. Residents in places like Tawila, Sudan, are reportedly surviving on less than half the minimum amount of drinking water recommended by the World Health Organization, the WHO.
And the healthcare facilities are overwhelmed.
Completely overwhelmed. Overcrowded treatment centers, like the cholera treatment center at Tawila Hospital, are struggling. They reportedly had 400 patients recently, despite having only 130 beds. There's rare footage emerging from besieged cities that highlights the dire plight of civilians. Children are reportedly dying from starvation. Severe malnutrition is affecting 3.5 million women and children, according to the World Food Program, the WFP. and getting aid in remains perilous due to the ongoing hostilities. The profound and tragic insight here is that beyond the immediate aid needed, these prolonged conflicts lead to a systemic collapse of public health infrastructure and basic services. This transforms entirely preventable diseases like cholera into devastating humanitarian catastrophes. It's a horrific demonstration of how conflict doesn't just kill directly through violence, but also indirectly and massively through the breakdown of the essential systems that support life.
Switching gears to a different kind of health scare, this one in the U.S. Cases of flesh-eating bacteria seem to be surging in Florida. Bay County, Florida reported its second victim linked to this rare and dangerous bacteria in 2025. That marks the fifth case across Florida this year. And cases have also emerged elsewhere, like Cape Cod and Louisiana.
Yes, these infections, which are scientifically known as Vibrio vulnificus infections, are often associated with having open wounds or even just cuts exposed to warm coastal waters, like the Gulf of Mexico or warm Atlantic waters. The bacteria thrive in those conditions, and the infections can lead to severe, sometimes fatal complications like necrotizing fasciitis, that's the flesh-eating aspect, if they're not treated very promptly with antibiotics.
So what's the advice for people?
Health officials are urging swimmers and beachgoers to be really vigilant, especially if you have any kind of skin injury, even a small cut or scrape. Avoid exposing wounds to warm seawater or brackish water, and seek medical attention immediately if symptoms like redness, swelling, pain, or fever occur after potential exposure. It highlights the need for increased awareness of this risk, especially during the warmer months when the bacteria are more prevalent in coastal waters.
Okay, and another product safety issue, a nationwide hand soap recall due to bacterial contamination.
Yes, a nationwide recall has been issued for certain hand soaps manufactured by a company called Dermarite. The issue is contamination with a bacterium, Burkholderia cepacia complex, which poses a serious health risk, particularly to people with weakened immune systems or chronic lung diseases. It can cause infections, including potentially life-threatening sepsis. The affected products were distributed across the United States and also Puerto Rico, primarily to healthcare facilities, but potentially reaching consumers too.
So what should people do?
Health officials are urging people, especially if they receive soap from healthcare settings, to check their cabinets for these specific Dermarite products. The recall lists specific lot numbers. They should discontinue use immediately if found. Consumers are advised to report any adverse reactions to their healthcare professionals and to the relevant authorities like the FDA. This recall really highlights the importance of vigilance regarding personal care products and the potential risks associated with contamination, prompting concerns among consumers about the safety of everyday items, even something as basic as hand soap.
Now, onto something that sounds like every parent's nightmare. An amusement park ride derailed in Wales, in the UK, injuring children.
Yes, a very distressing incident occurred at the Coney Beach amusement park in Porthcawl, Wales. An amusement ride called the Sizzler apparently derailed, resulting in injuries to 13 children. Eyewitness footage showed adults rushing to help the affected children off the damaged ride immediately afterwards.
Were the injuries serious?
Emergency services were dispatched quickly. Reports suggest that, thankfully, many of the children sustained relatively minor injuries, but 13 were affected. Authorities are now investigating the cause of the accident, and that will involve scrutinizing safety protocols and the ride's maintenance practices. The incident obviously sparked shock and concern among parents and local residents. It highlights the critical importance of stringent safety regulations in recreational environments, particularly when children are involved. It serves as a really stark reminder of the potential risks and the need for constant vigilance in operating amusement park rides.
And finally, a rather unusual and controversial local policy from the UK. The Wolverhampton City Council has introduced what's being called a fat tax on burial plots.
Yes, it sparked considerable controversy. The council in Wolverhampton, a city in England, has introduced higher charges for burial plots that are wider than the standard size at its municipal cemetery.
What's their justification for this?
The council attributes the decision partly to rising obesity rates in the area. They justify the increase in burial costs for those requiring larger plots as a way to manage limited land resources in municipal cemeteries, as larger coffins require wider graves.
How are people reacting?
Critics are arguing the policy is insensitive and discriminatory. They say it targets individuals based on their body size and effectively penalizes grieving families during an incredibly vulnerable time. The policy has led to mixed public reactions, as you can imagine, and it highlights these broader societal issues surrounding obesity, public health policy, and the really complex ethical considerations of implementing health-related fees in sensitive areas like burial rites. See Treat Crime and Social Justice.
Okay, let's turn our attention now to matters of crime and social justice, beginning with a concerning development involving a notorious figure from the UK. Hashim Abedi, who was one of the individuals responsible for the Manchester Arena bombing back in 2017, is now facing additional legal troubles while in prison.
That's correct. He's now been charged with 5 additional offenses, including 3 counts of attempted murder. These charges relate to an alleged attack on prison guards while he was incarcerated at HMP Belmarsh, a high-security prison in London. This is obviously a very troubling development. It underscores the continued threat potentially posed by individuals connected to terrorist activities, even when they are in custody. And it raises significant concerns about security protocols within correctional facilities handling such high-risk inmates.
So his previous conviction was for the bombing itself.
Yes, his previous actions related to the bombing, which tragically killed 22 people and injured hundreds more, marked him as a key figure in one of the most horrific terrorist events in recent British history. These new charges indicate what prosecutors allege is a continued pattern of violent behavior and significant criminal activities, prompting serious questions about the security and management of individuals like him within the prison system. The profound insight, perhaps, is that the challenge of counterterrorism extends beyond just preventing initial attacks. It includes the complex, long-term management of radicalized or dangerous individuals within the justice system itself, revealing the persistent, multifaceted nature of the threat, even behind bars.
Shifting focus now to Essex in the UK, Essex police announced that a resident of a hotel being used to accommodate migrants has been charged with sexual assault.
Yes. The police confirmed the charge and stated they are not pursuing any additional suspects in relation to this specific incident. This incident has, understandably, sparked significant concern within the local community. It's also drawn attention to the circumstances surrounding migrant accommodations and the safety issues, both for residents and the wider community, in these types of facilities. The case illustrates some of the complexities and challenges faced by law enforcement in addressing crimes within diverse communities, including migrant populations. It also touches on broader societal implications concerning dignity, legal protections, safety, and public perceptions related to migrant housing arrangements, which are often points of political debate.
Okay, now a tragic incident from the U.S. involving wildlife. A man died during a hike after being bitten by a timber rattlesnake.
Yes, a very tragic incident reported from Pennsylvania. Apparently, the man allegedly picked up the snake deliberately. This led to the encounter that resulted in a fatal venomous bite on his hand.
Oh no, so he handled the snake.
That's what the reports indicate. This incident just underscores the inherent dangers that come with handling wild animals, especially venomous species like rattlesnakes. It highlights the need for extreme caution during outdoor activities in areas where such snakes are known to live. It really serves as a stark reminder to hikers and all outdoor enthusiasts about the potential risks and the absolute importance of respecting wildlife from a distance, and seeking expert advice on how to behave around potentially dangerous animals rather than interacting with them directly.
Absolutely. Okay, and another rather unusual incident from the U.S., this time in Washington, D.C. A man has been charged with felony assault for allegedly throwing a sandwich at a federal law enforcement agent. A sandwich?
Yeah.
A felony charge. This sounds like something out of a very specific, slightly absurd movie plot.
It does sound unusual, doesn't it? This incident apparently occurred amidst heightened tensions in D.C. following a crackdown on crime ordered by President Donald Trump. Now, while the act of throwing the sandwich caused no physical injuries to the agent, it still resulted in this serious felony assault charge. The event has drawn media attention, partly because of its unusual nature, but also because of its context within these wider discussions about law enforcement, public conduct, and political tensions. What's fascinating here, perhaps, is how seemingly minor incidents can become amplified and reflect these broader societal tensions around authority, public order, and the very perception of crime and appropriate behavior towards officials, especially in a politically charged atmosphere. A sandwich becomes more than just a sandwich.
Indeed. Okay, let's move to India now, where a serious land dispute has erupted in Fatehpur, Uttar Pradesh. This is between Hindu and Muslim communities over a contested site. What's the nature of the dispute?
The Hindu group involved claims the land is a historically significant temple site, dedicated to Lord Krishna and Lord Shiva. The Muslim community, on the other hand, maintains that the site is actually the tomb of a Mughal-era military leader named Abdul Samad and his son. So you have conflicting historical and religious claims to the same piece of land.
And has it escalated?
Yes, the conflict intensified recently when a group of Hindus conducted prayers at the site, which caused unrest among the Muslim community. Now, official land records and a recent order from the Allahabad High Court are being referenced in efforts to try and resolve the dispute peacefully. But this incident really highlights the ongoing challenges of communal harmony in India, particularly concerning these historical claims and the deeply held religious sentiments that get attached to specific pieces of land. It signals a potentially prolonged struggle for ownership, recognition, and peaceful coexistence. It shows how potent these historical land disputes can be in igniting communal tensions.
And another troubling story from India, also involving potential wrongdoing connected to a religious site. A whistleblower, a former sanitation worker from the Dharmasthala Temple Administration in Karnataka, India, has come forward in a mass burial case.
Yes, this is a disturbing case. The whistleblower alleges that he and a small team were involved over time in the burial of numerous unidentified bodies in isolated forested areas near the temple town. Alarmingly, he claims these actions were carried out without any official supervision from police or health authorities and without proper documentation like postmortems.
And who ordered these burials, according to the whistleblower?
He indicated that the orders for these burials allegedly originated from the temple's own information center. This complicates the narrative significantly and highlights possible systemic issues within the institution itself regarding the handling of unclaimed or unidentified bodies found in the area. This revelation comes as authorities, including a Special Investigation Team, or SIT, are continuing to probe the circumstances surrounding these mass burials. The incident has garnered widespread media attention in India, prompting serious discussions about the legal and moral implications of such actions. It raises profound questions about the ethical responsibilities of religious organizations or any large institution in managing sensitive matters like the handling of unidentified human remains.
And finally, staying in India, Bollywood actress Shilpa Shetty has been implicated in a fraud case, along with her husband, Raj Kundra.
Yes, Shilpa Shetty, her husband Raj Kundra, and another individual have been implicated in a fraud case brought by a Mumbai businessman. The complainant has accused the trio of cheating him out of Rs 60 crore, which is approximately 7.2 million US dollars, related to an investment he made.
What was the investment in?
The allegations stem from a prior deal connected to their now defunct e-commerce company, which was called Best Deal TV, PVPD. The businessman claims he was misled during the investment process, leading to substantial financial losses for him. The case has sparked considerable media coverage in India and raised questions about the business dealings of high-profile figures in the Indian entertainment industry. It highlights the potential legal troubles that can arise in dynamic and sometimes complex business ventures involving celebrities. #OutCheckOutro.
Wow. Okay, we have just navigated a truly expansive deep dive today. We've touched on everything from astonishing new discoveries shaking up our whole understanding of the early universe to revolutionary energy technologies, then through the complex diplomatic chess games playing out on the global stage, the nuanced shifts in the world economy, and some really pressing environmental and social challenges facing communities worldwide. It's definitely a lot to take in, but, crucial for staying informed, right?
Absolutely. And as we consider all these vast and varied updates from around the globe, maybe a final thought for our listeners. What single thread, perhaps technological advancement, maybe shifting power dynamics, or even just the planet's changing face, what single thread do you believe will have the most profound impact on our collective future in the next decade? What really stands out to you as the most surprising or maybe the most significant takeaway from everything we've discussed today?